Good evening, group. Welcome to week 5 Zoom session for EDL 740, Intro to Graduate Research. It looks like Andy, Carla, and Chelsea are in the crowd, small crowd. Few opening comments from me this evening, and then I'll throw the floor open and you all can ask me questions if you want to. Several of you in some of your responses in your Google Forms and in response to some of the learning tasks noted how much you liked the Einstein, or the quote that was attributed to Einstein, of not everything that can be counted counts, and not everything that counts can be counted. From my research, actually, the attribution probably should belong to a guy named William Bruce Cannon, but I've always been fond of that quotation as well. It increased in meaningfulness for me once I became a school principal and school superintendent. A comment from a book that I believe is one of the most powerful influences on my thinking, and I think I've referenced this to you before, is a book by the title of Leadership in the New Science by Margaret Wheatley. And in that book, Dr. Wheatley points out that every act of measurement loses more information than it gains, closing the box irretrievably and forever on other potentials. That one also has some powerful meaning for me as we strive mightily to measure data, and it's particularly in the quantitative realm. And then we end up manipulating those numbers and manipulating that data and to try to tease out some meaning from it. Another book that along the same lines, and if you want to add it to your professional reading list, I can strongly recommend it. It's a book titled Presence by Peter Senge, Otto Scharmer, and a couple of other authors. And I'd like to quote this directly from the book for you. And if you want me to, I'll be glad to send it to you in printed form. But it has a very powerful meaning to me as we engage in the work of school leadership on the ground, in the milieu, if you will. And here's the quotation: "Not only does over-reliance on measurement doom modern society to continuing to see a world of things rather than relationships, it also gives rise to the familiar dichotomy of the hard stuff, what can be measured, versus the soft stuff, what can't be measured. If what's measurable is more real, it's easy to relegate that soft stuff, such as the quality of interpersonal relationships and people's sense of purpose in their work, to secondary status. This is ironic." And here's the most important piece of this quotation for me. "This is ironic," they say, "because the soft stuff is often the hardest to do well and the primary determinant of success or failure." Once I came across that quotation, and I love both Otto Scharmer's works. His primary works are built around a book that he wrote called Theory U. And then Peter Senge's original and most provocative work was called The Fifth Discipline. Those are excellent works that you can add to your professional reading list. But once I became a school principal and a superintendent, I became much more aware of that soft data concept. And so the hard data that we find ourselves accumulating and studying and perseverating on, stuff like student scores, which are important, student attendance rates, student graduation rates, mobility rates, teacher attendance rates, teacher degree achievement rates. All those things are nice, hard data elements. And we can put them in a spreadsheet and we can manipulate them. And since you are all now quantitative research specialists, you understand that we can run any number of tests on those data sets, things like t-test and multi-t-test and multivariate test, and linear regressions and ANOVAs and so forth, Pearson test, chi-square test. There's tons of manipulations that we can do on the hard data, particularly the quantitative data, that are designed to help us try to make sense of that data. But we should never drift too far away from the fact and the reality that the soft data is the stuff, as Sanghi and Sharma say, may be the most important, even though it's the hardest to measure. And this is the stuff that goes on, and the data you gather, that soft data you gather from having conversations with students, having conversations with teachers, attending PTA meetings, reading body language, watching the teachers leave the building at the end of the school day, taking a look at the way teachers interact with students in the hallway. Those are all soft data elements, but they are critical in your ability and my ability as school leaders to get our finger on the pulse of the school. In this, I like to call it, several of you have referenced, and you've looked at some research on organizational culture and school culture. The longer I've been doing this work, and I'm now 40 years deep into it, the more convinced I am that you and I as school leaders have a fundamental and most primary responsibility of trying to impact and shape the culture of the organization that we work in. And there are two huge and powerful data sets that I think should drive a lot of the decisions that you and I make. And the first one being student performance. And you notice I'm not talking about necessarily only student scores, student performance, how students perform in the classroom, how students perform on the field of play, how students perform in the band hall and in the orchestra room, how students perform when visitors are on the campus, how students perform in their community through their volunteer efforts, how students perform in their organizations, the student organizations, student council and chess clubs and all those kinds of things. They provide us a lot of soft data, but a number of you have mentioned in your comments through your research and reading through research articles how convinced you are that it's important that you and I address the whole child, the needs of the whole child and the education of the whole child. And I'm in absolute agreement with you on that one. I'm probably the poster child for carrying that banner. But here's the thing, there's two very important data sets that I think you and I have to keep our finger on the pulse of. One is that student performance thing, and some of them obviously is not easy to measure. And the second one is the culture of the organization that allows us to attract and retain talented people. Because at the end of the day, the student performance is the direct derivative of the quality of the adults that are working in the building. So your job and mine is to try to attract and retain the most talented people. That's tricky. That's tricky. And one of the things, if you were taking a class in the principalship under me or a superintendent preparation class, you would hear me ask this question of you, and so I'll just go ahead and ask it of you tonight. Why in the hell would talented people want to play on your team? Why would they sign on to work with you? And you and I have to look at that very introspectively as we go about our work day to day, especially in the school leadership role. Is sometimes we're tempted to focus only on the hard data because that's the easiest stuff to test, it's the easiest stuff to measure, and it's the easiest stuff for us to put on a presentation screen and talk about. Much more difficult. Now let's put that in the context of quantitative versus qualitative, because many of you have noted that after learning a little bit more about the possibilities for research methodologies, that you feel a little more comfortable about thinking about research in terms of the mixed methods. And I think that's pretty wise. Here's another way to think of it. The quantitative data gives us some nice hard numbers to take a look at. But the qualitative research that supports that, and a lot of that qualitative stuff is around the soft data. Really, the qualitative data is the thing, is the data that puts the quantitative data in context. And that gives much richer meaning to what we're looking at on a spreadsheet. It gives in some literature you'll hear and see the phrase sense making, and I like that way of viewing it and thinking about it. That qualitative data, that soft data, helps us make sense of what's going on. Another comment about the research and the stuff that you turn up through research is this. Especially in the quantitative realm, you see where they will articulate a hypothesis and then usually they try to prove it, and sometimes they try to prove the null hypothesis. But there's a temptation for a lot of people to think when research is done and the authors of the study come to some conclusions, if they haven't proven their hypothesis, then the study is a failure. Not so. Not so. What we know not to be true is every bit as important as what we know to be true. And there are very few studies in any field. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking the social sciences, chemistry, physics, medicine. It doesn't matter. In almost any field of study, there are very few research studies that, when they're done, are earth-shattering, game-changing conclusions. Almost always studies are pecking around the edges and refining our knowledge and bringing us a little tighter and a little tighter as to what we know and what we know and know not to be true. Rarely is a study published that actually shakes the world to its core. I think I might have mentioned this last week, but I can't remember, and I'm getting old. My memory's not that great. But just in the context of public health, it took 7,000 studies and 25 years. Let me say that again: 7,000 studies and 25 a window of time, 25 years, for public policy makers and even the American Medical Association to finally come to the conclusion that smoking was bad for you. That's phenomenal, because now we know it's just a fact. And actually studies were proving that a long time ago. But there's a lot of stuff that goes around that. But my point is this: what we know not to be true is just as important as what we know to be true. And from the field of education, I'll put this in a different context for you. We learn just as much from anti-example as we do from example. So those are powerful teaching tools either way you look at them. I've already commented briefly on the number of tests that we can run on data sets. And if you pursue a doctorate, you'll have to take more, we call these tool courses. If you pursue a doctorate, you'll take probably 9 to 12 hours of tool courses, and you'll a much more in-depth study on quantitative methods and tools. But bottom line is this: there are a lot of ways to manipulate the data and massage the numbers. Most of it is done in good faith and with noble intent. Sometimes researchers will manipulate data in ways that they try to make the data show the outcomes that they want. I read just this last week that a very prominent researcher from Cornell University was suspended by the university, and the university is now undertaking a review of that professor's 20 years of research, because they found that he had been manipulating some data and leaving some data out when he was coming to some conclusions. And so you can do some fancy footwork with data, but your motives have to be pure in the interest of doing that. Comment about your proposals. One is, as you think about how you might like to study, one of the challenges that we face at the university level, particularly with people like yourselves that think they may want to do some research in schools, particularly in the area of educational research. More and more school districts are reluctant to let us have access to the students and the student data. And it's for a couple of reasons. There's a lot of concerns about confidentiality and FERPA. And on the second level is school districts, as most of you know, have over the last decade or a couple of decades began to operate on shorter and shorter and shorter budget margins. And so it becomes a little bit of a labor burden on part of the school district to have somebody that's there overlooking research that's going on, or pulling data files for people like you and me that would that might like to study their student population or portions of their student population, or their faculty and staff as well. And finally, this week you all are studying week 5. You're looking at the concept of literature reviews. A lot of people think of as a literature review as sort of a pain in the ass thing that you just have to do in order to get to what you want to do, which is the study. And I actually love literature reviews because the literature review allows us to dig deeply into either the theoretical framework or the past research in this area that you and I might have interest in, and whether it's literacy or collaboration or cultural efficacy, or there's all kinds of ways that research can be done. You're aware of that. But I love the literature reviews because it allows us to take a look inside the minds of a lot of really smart people and get to see what questions were driving their thinking and their actions, and what kinds of conclusions they came to as a result of the studies that they crafted. And it's just amazing to me, and literature in general allows us to get inside the mind of others. But on those lit reviews, they are, as you know, they're tightly focused in a particular genre or a realm of thinking, and it really allows you to get into the brains of some smart people trying to dig out information that will help you and I become better educators. And at the end of the day, the bottom line is how do we create better futures for the students that we serve? That's the bottom line. Okay, I'm going to wind down my yakking and allow you all to ask questions. Andy asked if I would mind putting those book titles, authors, and yes, I'll share some of those with you. You don't even want to know all the books that I would like to recommend to you, because you wouldn't ever sign up for a class that I was teaching again, probably. But yeah, I love to read, and there's a lot of really bright people that have influenced my thinking over the years, and I like to think they've made me a better educator. Time will tell, I guess. After I'm buried, maybe we'll see what they put on my tombstone. Ask me questions if you have them. Hi, Randy. Randa. See all who's with us tonight. Heather, yep. Chelsea. Good deal.
Question, and this is, if I'm out of place, please correct me, and I'll be glad to email you. But could you talk this a little bit out of class? But could you talk about the SLLA a little bit? I'm about to take the praxis course over at LSU in Baton Rouge in weekend after this, and I know I've been advised to schedule the test right after that. What should I expect in regards to, I guess maybe the approach to the test in everything? Is there going to be focusing on, will it be focused from the research aspect that we're studying here? Just curious, just any pointers on that.
Andy, I'm not the right guy to ask on that one. All my service has been in Texas, but I can tell you who can. Have you had a class with Tracy Johnson yet?
Yes, yeah, I've been in one of her classes. Yeah, she's the advisor for the course.
I've had some back channel communication with her, and I know that she has access to some study materials, and she's a little more privy to what's there in the SLLA test. Did I say that correctly? SLLA.
Yeah, SLLA. I have to slow it down so I don't slur my letters together.
Tracy can be.
Yeah, I just thought I would ask, since like I'm in the internship and you're the supervisor, and please don't think I'm neglecting it. I am. I'm sitting down this weekend to start putting some stuff in there, so I don't want you to think I was slacking off on it.
Understand. Been there, done that. Other questions? Thanks for asking. Sorry I didn't have a good answer for you on that one. You all, as a general rule, we got company. Your APA citation stuff is just getting better and better every week, tighter. As you know, to me, that's just an important technical piece for you and I to be able to carry off. It makes us look smarter if we know how to do that when we're dealing with other colleagues in our profession. Certainly, if you get to the point that you're actually going to do a study, you're going to try to have it published, or you're working on a dissertation, then you'll have to look at every period and every capital letter and not capital letter, and it'll have to be done perfectly, actually, if you're going to try to have something published. But it's important to be able to not only to read that stuff, but also to be able to cite it appropriately. Other questions if you got?
I have a question.
Who's asking?
Lasana Clark.
Hey, hello.
Hey, hi. I have a question. And it may be irrelevant to what we're talking about, but as a leader, I'm in a small town and we have the school board election coming up. So it seems to me, with most of the teachers, majority of the teachers, that people that the superintendent and assistant superintendent are making decisions and giving people jobs to keep them from running, to be an elected officer. Now, as a principal, as a leader, I mean, is there a way you can stand up to the superintendent and say, hey, look, is that when the data comes in and you say, hey, look, I want this teacher in this place because, they're showing growth over the last 4 or 5 years. They have test scores have improved. All their kids are performing. Well, majority of the kids are performing at above grade level. So, I mean, do you have that right to stand up to the superintendent, or you just go with the flow?
Lasana, thanks for the question. A couple of you said you're having a hard time hearing me. Is this any better?
I hear you.
Tricky question, because you're talking about politics there. And if I understood your question right, you're coming up on a school board election. Did I hear that correctly?
Yes.
I would strongly advise, and by the way, about half of my service is in small schools, and about half of my service is in large urban, suburban schools. So I understand both. But both from a teacher perspective, well, just as an educator perspective, it doesn't matter whether you're a teacher or a campus level administrator or a central office administrator. I think it's extremely dangerous to get involved into the local politics of a school board election. The people that are running for school board, and I can promise you, you're going to serve in school districts that have some jackasses on the school board. That's the truth.
I agree.
And God love them, because both I've got brothers that have been school board members. My dad was a school board member. My granddad was a school board member. I don't know how good people even want to do that, but I'm eternally thankful that they do. my grandfather used to say that it should be like the military draft, that everybody ought to have to do it for 2 years just so they'd know what it feels like. But I strongly advise people, educators, not to get into the local politics of a school board election. Now, your question, though, was specifically, you said standing up to the superintendent. If I remember correctly, you already have a leadership assignment in your district. Is that correct?
No.
Okay. Then I'm.
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. I'm sorry. Yes, I do.
Okay. So I would not publicly confront the superintendent. I would ask for a private meeting, and if you got hard data to support your position, then yeah, present it, make your case. But superintendents, and I can speak from experience, superintendents are political creatures. What you want to do as a person that's working, if that's your boss, what you want to do is perform well and try to make your boss look smart. And if you have a good relationship with your boss, he or she should be, if they're strong leaders, they should be willing to listen to well-made arguments and consider honestly and with fidelity good data in the interest of making decisions. What I wouldn't do, though, is engage in political subterfuge with your boss, because I've known a lot, particularly principals. I've known a lot of principals that decided it was a good idea to get in a headbutting contest with their superintendent, and the superintendent almost always wins. That's just the reality of it. If you find yourself working in a district where you just don't think it's a healthy environment, and I've done this on many occasions. I've moved on down the road, and I don't advise this, but I've even quit a couple of jobs without having another one in my pocket. But that's your personal decision. You got to base it on your own personal circumstances, and particularly financial circumstances. Thanks for asking, though. Other questions if you got them. Okay, I won't belabor it. You know how to reach me. You got my cell phone number and you have my email address, and you can message me in Moodle. I think you all know by now you're going to hear back from me pretty quickly if you reach out to me. All righty. Thanks for being here tonight. Good luck to you. 2.5 weeks to go. Hang on.